Have you ever admired a large fabric print and wondered what to do with it? The solution? Make the block so big. If you're wondering how big is so big, please welcome quilt designer Debbie Bowles to Sewing with Nancy.
Nancy, I'm so happy to be back for part 2 of this series, So Big Quilt Blocks. And today, we're going to be working with slightly angled segments around a featured fabric to set those off. These 18-inch quilt blocks will feature a large center square, a small accent square, and angled side blocks. When multiple blocks are put together into a quilt, there'll be lots of design movement, and the color will flow from block to block.
So big quilt blocks, that's what's coming up next on Sewing with Nancy.
Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, a complete line of sewing, quilting, and embroidery machines and sergers. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Madeira, specializing in embroidery, quilting, and special effect threads, because creativity is never black and white. Koala Studios, fine sewing furniture custom built in America. Clover, makers of sewing, knitting, quilting, and embroidery products for over 25 years. Experience the Clover difference. Amazing designs and Class A needles.
I always like to look at Debbie's quilts and see where these big blocks fall. And Debbie, it has a lot of motion to this block and very few pieces.
Right, exactly. And it's a slightly different kind of motion. It's a large square. This is a 12.5-inch cut. This is a 6.5-inch small accent square, and then we have the 2 angled pieces. And the movement on this quilt, instead of kind of going around the block, the movement is on that angled line, which makes a big difference in how some of the other quilts are going to look.
And if you missed our first program on this series, you might want to watch it online or on DVD or wait till it comes back on your public television program station. But as you can see, for this particular design, we have these, again, very large prints.
Large prints, which have become so popular in so many real and fake fabric colors for flowers.
Yes.
But always there are large fabric flowers out there to choose from.
Now these 2 sizes are small. You could use them as a wall
nice
quilt.
Wall piece. You could put bigger borders on them and turn them into a lap quilt.
Sure, but if you wanted to make a bed-size quilt, here's one of Debbie's designs.
Right, and the thing that I'd kind of like to talk about with that one is in the 2 that you saw previously, the lights were very light and they were almost solid looking lights. In this one, I've used a small print. It's going to read as a light, but it is actually a small print. And also the block layout on this quilt is more of a marching. Notice how the line flows diagonally up the quilt.
This is a perfect pattern quilt design for fussy cutting in this koi quilt. Beautiful fabric there, Debbie.
It is beautiful. Those fish are just kind of breathtaking. And I think the thing that is fun about this is because the piecing is so easy for most people, they can really focus on getting the right colors, getting the right fabric. And with the koi fish, I also want to draw everybody's attention to the fact that there isn't a fish in every square.
Sure.
Which lends then to your eye to want to go back to where the fish is.
This is another nice quilt design for directional prints, and quickly the Christmas tree or the trees.
Right, right. And what you're going to want to do, we'll talk about in depth a little bit later, but you can use a directional print. You just have to think about it before you put the pieces together.
Soon we'll be showing you how to assemble this, but you can see there are a lot of options with this So Big quilt block. For this particular quilt design, find your favorite big print. And Debbie, you found some fascinating ones.
I did. And now is a good time to talk about this. Not all big prints need to be fussy cut. Sometimes the repeat just works out great, and this is one of those. There's not much background. So this is what we'll be using for the center square. This is what we'll be using for the smaller accent square. This is the light, and this is the dark that we're going to be using.
And it's important, most quilts need that contrast of light, medium, and dark
Yes.
to make it pop. Otherwise, it kind of blends together. And if you watch the program, the first program of this series, we used a lot of variety of fabrics for the center block. Well, this time we just used one print.
One print, and then we do the contrast with the small accent square.
And this is 12.5 inches.
And this is 6.5 inches. And then these strips will become our angled side blocks, and those are 7 inches wide.
So cut the strips, and you had a great hint earlier in this two-part series, and that is many times I have a variety of rulers in my
We all do.
sewing room.
We all do.
Try to use the same brand. They
yes.
have the, not promoting one over the other, they just have the same markings.
Yes, and especially when you're doing such large blocks, there's not very many seams, so there's no place
Sure.
to make up your little cutting
The
areas.
little fudge factor is gone.
And even though they're all fairly accurate, you'll get the most accuracy if you are doing all of your cutting with the same brand of rulers. Now for the angled side seams, the really, really important thing is that the fabrics are layered right sides up. And that's not typically how
No.
we layer for cutting, so it's an important thing to remember when you're doing it.
So I have right side, and then the brown is right side up, so.
Right. We're going to cut these into 13-inch long segments, and they were 7 inches wide to begin, so we're going to line this up right on our 13 and get it nice and square because they will become the sides of our blocks. Oh, that was a bad cut.
You can cut one more time.
Each of these strips will yield 3 13-inch
Okay. And you could just
rectangles, and I
square
would
that
just
up.
square that off.
And
and
it happens. you
Cut
know?
another 13 inches. I actually cut with both hands. Nancy, do you also?
Yes.
I read it in a book when I was teaching myself to quilt at the beginning. I read it in a book, and it said if you've never used a rotary cutter before, learn to cut with both hands
So you can cut on both sides of the ruler to
without
square.
having to
Switch
move
everything.
yourself around. But we'll go through each strip. We'll cut each strip into 13-inch segments. And now we're going to cut the angled piece.
Okay. That would be the cue to me. Here are some of the pieces that have been.
Here's how we began. This is the 7-inch by 13-inch rectangle. We're going to cut the angle by marking this layered piece 2.5 inches in from each side. And I do have my marking pencil right here.
Yep.
And my ruler. So I would lay the ruler on the edge, go in 2.5 inches, and make a small mark right there. Then I would do the same thing on the bottom, 2.5 inches in, right there. I'm going to position my ruler right on those 2 marks, just like that. And now, I do want to press down hard enough now so that I cut through both layers.
There you are. Now here's the reason why Debbie recommended that we cut or layer with right side
Right sides up.
This is the key.
Because we're going to actually make 2 blocks out of these 2 sections. Because they were layered right sides up, the fabrics, the angles will be ready to stitch. So now we've got right sides up. We're going to stitch them together by flipping over the right sides together.
And the stitching is with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, but we have to have these little dog ears. Because when you seam them together,
Right.
you're going to have, because of the angle, at that 1/4 of an inch, you can have that little dog ear extended. So here you can see that I'm stitching this 1/4 of an inch seam, and as I finish one, I just butt the next piece together up to the strip and then keep sewing, cut the chains, thread chains between, and this shows how it has been stitched and that little extra dog ear
Right,
is
and
there.
it's a very shallow angle.
Right.
So it's a very tiny, tiny dog ear.
And that will allow it to be straight across, and then you need to do
Right.
some pressing,
And then
of course.
we're going to press it. Again, we are accustomed to pressing towards the dark. So after you set your seam, you are going to do that same thing. Again, you're going to press with an up and down motion so that you don't distort it. But the other beauty of this side angled block is that it's too long. We're going to trim it down because if it's not stitched perfectly, where that's going to show up is it's not going to be even on the two ends. So I specifically designed it so that you'd be able to square this up. So all of your side blocks will get trimmed to 12.5 inches wide.
So you're going to cut a little bit off.
Just going to cut about a half of an inch.
And these have been trimmed, so I'll just show you that they've been trimmed just a little bit. So easy that. So now to assemble that. So we'll show how it all goes together, and I'll let you place
So
it.
here's the large square. In this particular block, we're going to put the light side in, and then there's the accent square, and then the light side is in again. So there's the 18-inch quilt block, and it's very easy to piece together. Actually, we're going to turn this one this direction.
Oh, that's why you're the designer.
So when it's time to piece them, the quickest way to piece them is simply to sew a side piece to the center square and stitch it together, come out, sew a side piece to the small square, stitch it together, press it, and then again we have one little place where we'd like for sure for the block to line up.
And right in this area, the seams are pressed in opposite directions, opposing directions, and you kind of snug them together, put a pin there,
Exactly.
and then do the stitching of that seam. That way
Exactly.
it will match up. And I'll show you the finished block. And it's a big block.
It is a big block.
It went together quickly, and now we'll show you how you can rotate and position the blocks. We have our design wall behind us to show you the versatility of this block. And Debbie, we have 4 samples right here.
We do. We just made 4 blocks. We've got 3 different arrangements we're going to try. And let's start, Nancy, with putting them in kind of a marching, what I call a real organized way to do it. And your 2 sides, that's exactly right. Mine's going to go like this. And here's one way they could go. This is going to jigsaw up and across the quilt. Let's turn them now, Nancy, and let's put these 2 small squares towards the center.
Okay.
And rotate your big block to the outside edge.
So you
Let's rotate it one more time.
Okay.
Nope, you know what? I'm the one that's wrong.
Okay.
Keep yours where it's at.
Okay. All right, we'll give this a
There we
try.
go. And now put this with the small square towards the outside corner.
Okay.
Now you can see that the frames are going to make a different look for us,
Yeah.
like this.
What a difference in just a little rotation.
Most people see this. They see that. Okay, now let's do the pinwheel shape. And we're going to do that by finding the skinny black edge on each block and putting that black edge into the center. Exactly.
Okay. One there. And then, let's see.
This is where a digital camera comes in very, very helpful.
Sure.
As you're designing your own layout at home. Snap, 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 turn the blocks. There's no trouble remembering which one you liked best after you've put them together. And the last little tip involves changing up some of the accent squares.
You can make some blocks with different fabrics. What a change. The first quilt in this program, Debbie, you used a big print and you cut strips and cut them into 12.5-inch blocks.
Yes.
But this one, this big print, has to be fussy cut, and there's a good reason why.
Right. Nancy, on this one, let's just look a little carefully here. We've got a couple of larger flowers of some kind. Then we have a different smaller flower in this one, different smaller flower in this one. Had to do with how the fabric worked out, because not all fabric, large floral fabric, is really the same. And sometimes you need to really look at the fabric before you cut into it. In this particular one, it happens that if we were to cut a 12.5-inch strip, more or less, we
Right.
would get some different looks going across the strip. That isn't always the case.
And this would kind of be
Be
negative.
almost a negative space, and it kind of looks like this one. It isn't always the case, but it pays to take some time with your fabric before you cut into it. And there's lots of different template cutters out there that can help you do that. Or a simple frame like this can help you eyeball it.
So you would have a little waist, but you would maybe center a rose like this and center
One of these other flowers.
Right, like that. There'd be other reasons to use this print, but that gives it this very unique look.
Right.
But that's fabric by the yard that you may find. But then you saw this quilt earlier, this wall hanging of the koi fish. This is a unique fabric.
It is a unique fabric, and I do want to draw everybody's attention to the fact that there's 3 different colored fish, and there's a block that I call the blank block. Partially because of how the fabric was done, and partially because it gives some interest to the quilt. This is the fabric on the bolt. And you can see that if I had wanted to have all 3 fish in one 12.5-inch square, I wouldn't have got much of the fish,
Right.
just their faces.
Sure.
So instead what I elected to do was cut 1 fish in each square. And because the fabric is so gorgeous, Nancy, with those waves,
Yes. And you didn't necessarily follow the straight of grain, and that's okay for
Right.
this wall-hanging decorative quilt. So you'd have to audition, which we're doing here with this frame, and then you'd cut it with a block and mark it before cutting.
right, exactly.
So we're now going to take a look at some novelty prints, and children's novelty prints are very commonly found, and it's cute little puppies in this print. Now you also notice the block is much smaller.
This is the 9-inch block that is part of the pattern. It is an exact copy of the 18-inch block. It just happens to be half size. Turns out to be a great size for kids' novelty prints, and that's why we're looking at it. These puppy dogs, because there's only a light, a dark, a center, and an accent square, it doesn't take very long usually to choose your fabric, but you can still make a mistake, Nancy.
And this you classify as one of your not so perfect combinations.
Exactly. I do love a polka dot, but I chose for this one a polka dot that is too busy for the dog print. And if you choose a smaller polka dot, if I had chosen a smaller polka dot, it would have set the block off a lot better than this big and busy polka dot. So once we're just putting up a second colorway of this.
It really reads so much better. You can see the print, you can see the
Right.
motion. So even experts sometimes make corrections.
A bad decision. A bad decision.
Here's the same print, but this time,
Done in a different combination of fabrics.
wow, that makes a huge impact.
So now I went back to very, very light, a solidish looking light. Now the dog print really shines.
Great example. As you saw that there is a 9-inch block and an 18-inch block with this design, and here's a full-size bed quilt that you can see that combines those 2 quilt blocks.
Each of these horizontal rows has 2 18-inch blocks and then 2 9-inch blocks going across the quilt for just some added fun and interest in the quilt. Here's the big block. Do we have the little 9-inch square?
We do.
Right here?
We do. We
Let's
have
show them where the 9-inch squares are.
Okay, right here.
Right there. So here's the 18-inch block.
And let's get the
And then
18-inch.
2.
Okay.
This is 12.
Oh, excuse me. Here we go. We have some more frames down here. So you saw from the full-size quilt that we had on the wall, there's the
big block.
one. Okay,
And then touching it are the 2 small ones.
1, 2.
And then the other thing that this quilt is showing is that the dark has been positioned closest to the center square. Even though this hot pink wouldn't necessarily be a dark, it's darker than the green. And this quilt was made by my friend Heidi, who does such a great color choice.
It's fun, lively, and big prints plus the accent color really go well together.
Right. And not all of her center squares were cut identically. So there's the flowers are moving around. That's what you're seeing in the quilt.
Sure. Well, Debbie, what great quilt designs you've given us and shared with us using prints, using unique layouts. It's made quilting a new option for me.
Well, it's a fun block to put together for all of your fans.
And thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thanksgiving inspires generosity once a year, but what happens to the spirit of giving on the other 364 days? Today's Nancy's Corner guest penned a novel that imagines what good could come from practicing the holiday spirit year-round. Welcome back, Jennifer Cheverini, the author of books in the Elm Creek Quilt series and her new book, The Giving Quilt. Jennifer, this is book number 20.
That's right.
Wow, that's an amazing journey of introducing how Sarah was introduced to quilting for Sylvia way back in book number 1, and now things have changed.
Well, they have. Now Sarah is an accomplished quilter herself, and she and her friends run a celebrated quilters retreat in central Pennsylvania in Elm Creek Manor, a beautiful historic home.
I remember reading the first book and then the second book, and then it's kind of like, oh, I want to see what happens next.
Well, I certainly hope my readers feel that way. I always wonder too, what journeys are these characters going to take next? So it's always exciting me to write the next book to find out.
So we talked about earlier in the opening that 364 days of the year, we don't always think about Thanksgiving or quilt giving as you penned it in this book. And tell us a little bit, not too much, but a little bit about
Just
the plot.
Just a teaser, not to give anything away.
Right.
Well, in this story, one of the Elm Creek quilters, Gretchen, has tried to inspire her friends to give back to their communities in a more unified, tangible way. So she suggests that they create a special week of quilt camp called Quiltsgiving, which would take place in the winter, right after Thanksgiving. And quilters can come from around the world. They can enjoy a lovely week at Elm Creek Quilt Camp, sewing, spending time with friends, learning new tricks and learning new techniques. And in exchange for that free week at Quilt Camp, all of the quilts that they make go to a worthy cause. And in this case, the worthy cause is Project Linus, which is a real-life organization that provides quilts and afghans and blankets for children in need.
We've had representatives from Project Linus on Sewing with Nancy many times, so this ties right in full circle.
And it's such a wonderful organization. It seemed to me that if the Elm Creek quilters were real people, they would definitely be involved with Project Linus. So it was a natural fit for the story.
As with most of your Elm Creek novels, you have a quilt that goes with the book.
Well, that's right. And at Quilt Camp, at Quiltsgiving, they always have one quilt that they call the Giving Quilt. And this is a different pattern every year, but it's always intended to be a simple, easy pattern that's still very striking, very pretty. But it's something that a quilt camper could reasonably put together in a week. It's meant as something special whenever you want to make a quilt expressly for giving, whether it's a wonderful cause like Project Linus, or anytime a gift-giving occasion comes up and you need to have a quilt project to turn out relatively quickly.
And I always encourage when I give seminars that everyone make something every year that they'll give away to someone they'll never know.
Oh, that's a lovely idea.
And this great block that's called the Resolution Square.
That's right. It's called the Resolution Square. It's still very simple.
Yes,
and
here's
you
the
can
block.
see it's a dark and light block and a rectangle and then some larger squares. And by putting the blocks on point, as I've done in this quilt, it gives it a whole different look and it makes it seem much more complicated than it really is.
Well, it's a smart looking block. But back to the Elm Creek quilters. Are you going to give us any little juicy bit of change that's happened, or what to look for, or what character to watch?
Well, there are 5 new characters in this story who come and attend quilt camp, and as Sylvia encourages them to do on the first day, they each contemplate their reasons for giving. Why is it so important, especially if you're facing difficult times yourself, to use your talents to give back to your community, to give to other people? And while they're all contemplating that idea and working on their projects, they become good friends. There is one character that will be familiar to readers. She was introduced in an earlier book, Circle of Quilters. She was the one character out of the 5 finalists for a job at Elm Creek Manor who didn't get the job. Everyone else of those 5 found a place at Elm Creek Manor.
So the plot thickens.
It does, and we get to see what Karen's been up to in the meantime.
Well, you've, I'm sure, tantalized everyone to tune in to open up the Giving Quilt and see, and then possibly make a quilt for their own. Thank you, Jennifer, for being our guest.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
And also thank you for being with us this 2-part series on Sew Big Quilt Blocks with our special guest, Debbie Bowles. I'm sure that you will be equally as excited to start a big block quilt as I will be. At nancyzeman.com, you can find information about all the Nancy's Corner guests with Jennifer and everyone we've had for the last 3 years at Nancy's Corner. And then plus, you can rewatch this program or connect to me socially on the social media markets. So nancyzeman.com has everything Sewing with Nancy. Thank you for joining us in this series. A special thanks to Jennifer as well as Debbie Bowles. And thank you. Bye for now.
Debbie Bowles has created a pattern that serves as the reference for the big quilt blocks featured in this program. It's $7.99 plus shipping and handling. To order this pattern, call 800-336-8373 or visit our website at sewingwithnancy.com/2702. Order item number MIQ233 BQ3 Big Quilts 3 pattern. Credit card orders only. To pay by check or money order, call the number on the screen for details. Visit Nancy's website at nancyzeman.com to see additional episodes, Nancy's blog, and more. Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zeman, has been brought to you by Baby Lock, Madeira Threads, Koala Studios, Clover, Amazing Designs, and Class A Needles. Closed captioning funding provided by Oliso. Sewing with Nancy is a co-production of Nancy Zeman Productions and Wisconsin Public Television.